You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today. At Monash University, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation.
Well done.
Hi everybody, I'm Xinxin, sitting in for Zen. With me is my co-host John.
Hey Xing. Hi everybody and welcome to Communicate, another show where you're going to hear some interesting perspectives on communication styles.
In the studio together with us tonight is Dr. Tony Lin Zhang. Is the co-founder of Moi Health Tech, which is a peer mentoring program for doctors and nurses in China, wishing to develop their practice from a more international perspective. Tony has also held a PhD in cancer epidemiology and has been in Melbourne for 3 years. Welcome.
Thank you, Xinxin and John, having me here.
Thank you. And together with us, another guest is Michael Lanyon. Michael Lanyon is a partner at Lodge Smith Lanyon Lawyers, based in Melbourne. Michael identified the need to set up an office in China in response to people's interest in investing into the Australian market. Michael has also worked closely with the abbot of the Shaolin Temple. Welcome.
Wow. Xinxin, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. And as I said before, I'm the one that's wearing a tie, so I'm the only formally dressed one here.
That's okay. And you've got a good face for radio too.
Perfect face for radio.
Okay, the abbot. Tell us about the abbot, please.
Well, the Shaolin Temple is the temple where the Kung Fu Panda comes from. So that's where the fighting monks originate. And the abbot of the Shaolin Temple, I think, is the most senior of the 100 million Zen Buddhists in China. And he's been looking to establish a temple in Australia. And there was a bit of a kerfuffle, as you often have in Australian systems, which led to some litigation, which we had on his behalf. But I have to say I loved meeting the abbot. I loved dealing with him. I've spent several days with him, sort of going through witness statements and translations and things like that, and I've found him to be a very humble person, but also a very switched on and alert mind. Was there lots of good food involved? Well, of course, you don't get meat if you're at a Buddhist area. But the food was the food was good. I loved my food. I eat everything. If you want to give me snake or scorpion or whatever, I eat it all. So that's fine. But as I say, as a vegetarian area, the food was perhaps a bit more conservative.
Mm-hmm. We have put together some questions with the aim of learning more about people's communication strategies. Let's start with our first question. Thinking about communication, what does the word empowerment mean to you?
So, as a doctor working in China for 7 years, so I think that the one word in my mind to empowerment mean is effective communication. So effective is the word in my mind. So I would like to share some experience with you, because as a doctor in China, you have face a lot of the patients each day, so almost 100 patients. So you have to deal with how to communicate very efficiently and effective. So make them to understand what is the diagnosis and how to treat your disease. So to empower our patients with our communication, I think we have to give a very effective and efficient communication. Yeah, that's my one word in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can perhaps continue on from there, Tony, empowerment, of course, the middle part of that is power. And if you get your language right, that's a fabulous power. As a lawyer, I think of myself as a wordsmith. So every word is critical, particularly in the written document, and particularly in English-based law, which is sort of what we call black letter law. So it works on what has been said, not what has been meant. So As a wordsmith, you've got to be very accurate with your words. The other thing I've noticed, though, is that people tend to hear what they expect to hear, not necessarily what you say. So if you're in a negotiation and the other side is listening for what you talk about, for example, interest rates, that's the bit they concentrate on, and they might miss the little subtle point that you made in relation to the due date. So people come out of the meeting having listened to the bits they were particularly interested in and having not heard other parts. So that's a real trick for me.
So what are some of the indicators to know you are not being fully listened to?
Well, often you don't work it out till later because it's a bit hard to believe that people haven't heard things that you've said that you think are very plain. But I'm interested with Tony as well, because Tony, I remember, going to doctors perhaps with my parents when the messages have been bad, and I find it very hard after the meeting to actually remember what has been said because I've been so traumatised in the meeting. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, as a doctor currently, I'm working in the Peter Mac Cancer Hospital. So this situation often happened because you have to talk with the patient who have very serious disease. So you have to convey this information very carefully. So with the patient or also with their parents or their relatives, you have to talk with them in a very frankly way, but also you have to convey this information in a very certain way that can let them not feeling very bad, but you still have this information can be understood.
I think as a lawyer, one of the things that we're able to do is to confirm things in writing.
Yep.
So we can leave the meeting and then send, a letter or an email or something confirming the important points. But I know, when friends of mine, for example, are going and visiting a matrimonial lawyer, I don't do matrimonial law, but it's very emotional. So I often say, take me along because you won't remember what's been said.
What is that law? Matrimonial?
Matrimonial, so family law, divorce law.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bit like Tony's area. It's emotional, and I think people, when the emotions are there, they often don't hear the words.
Is it fair to say there's some really key words, such as the word cancer?
Yeah.
Just to hear that word, all of a sudden you're working out your funeral. And talking to a lawyer, you hear the word fine or penalty.
Yeah, that's right.
All of a sudden, these words just stay right in front of your face. So it's about overcoming that shock, isn't it?
Well, sometimes it's actually using that to your advantage. So, again, if I can give an example, if I said to a client, and I used to, because you sort of think about things and somebody's got a case and you say, it's not a very good case, but you've got a 10% chance of winning. They hear the word winning. They don't hear 10%. They don't hear 9 times out of 10 you're going to lose. They just hear the word winning. So I now have changed my approach and I say to people, you're going to lose. You're going to go to jail. Bring a toothbrush with you because you're not coming out again. That gets the message across far better than something that's a bit equivocal.
So we've got doctors and lawyers talking toothbrushes.
Yeah.
I can see the link, really.
Well, my mother was a dentist, so I'm allowed to, and my father was a
it's dealing
doctor,
with the difficulties. Yeah.
Cleaning your teeth.
Yeah.
You're a doctor, it's easy.
Yeah, as I can see in the studio, a lot of body language are happening. So here comes our second question. Body language is a two-way communication method. How do you use it? And why does it work in some cases?
So I think body language is really important for your communication, especially your eye contact. So when you talk with some people who with eye contact, you can convey the information that is a subtle information, positive, negative. This is really important. So when you speak, but also you do a lot of gestures to make yourself to be understood. This is very important. So when I do or kind of communication with my co-founders, with my interns, I have to talk with them in a certain way with my eye contact. If I speak with one specific intent, I have to convey my information with my eye contact and using my hands to do some gestures to make myself understood.
So, Tony, just looking through the doctor lens, things like, is it ever appropriate to sit on the bed and talk to the patient?
So I think that you have to let your body to close to the patient. That's more polite way and also very easily communicated way, so that you can always communicate with the patient with a closer distance, but keep that distance not too close. You have to close your distance to talk with them using your gestures or eye contact to make them be understood. Yeah.
Good.
And for me, I'm not really a student of body language. And I'm listening to this, I'm thinking I'm going to have to go and do some reading and learn a bit more. So I don't know that I use body language, but I do use body positioning and some other sort of signals like that. So, for example, in a meeting, before a meeting, I think about where I'm going to position people to sit. It's a bit like people think that you can command a meeting if you're at the head of the table, but often you do a lot better if you're in the middle of the table. So I think about where I'm going to sit. I often position the lawyers together, one after another, and I'll often position the clients together. And that's just to form a bond between the clients, a bond between the lawyers, and perhaps take a bit of the antagonism out of it.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
And we've got Sing Sing sitting in for Zen. Thanks, Sing Sing, for being here today. I forgot to mention earlier in the show that Communicate is run by Empower Your English, and we're a business that's been going for 18 months, and it is all about empowering people's communication and being respectful about people's different styles and unpacking it, and that's what we love doing at Communicate.
Absolutely. And tonight in studio with us is Dr. Tony Lin Zhang, who is the co-founder of Moe Health Tech, which is a peer mentoring program for doctors and nurses in China wishing to develop their practice from a more international perspective. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Michael Lanyon. Michael Lanyon is a partner at Logie Smith Lanyon Lawyers, based in Melbourne. Michael identified the need to set up an office in China in response to people's interest in investing into the Australian market. Welcome.
Hi, Shin. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Tony, I just want to go back to your mentoring program before we go on to the next question, because I know it's a word that Empower Your English love all the time about different types of peer support and mentoring. I'm sure, Michael, I know you quite well, and I've seen you do a lot of mentoring in the law practice, but looking through the medical lens, how powerful that is for nurses from China and doctors to basically connect and be able to get some really good takeaway messages.
Yeah, talking about the mentoring, this is a very essential part in our communication. So I co-founding kind of the peer education for doctors and nurses who want to better have better their medical English, professional English. So I leading a group of doctors who want to help Chinese doctors to better their professional communication. So when they try to make the peer education, we use online communication tool like the Zoom or GoToMeeting, like that software. So we help them to communicate very efficiently with the patient who are foreign background, like they're from US, UK, Australia. They go to China and treat it in Chinese hospital. So the doctor face this patient. They have to speak with them in English. Otherwise, it's not very efficient communication. So we help them to grasp the vocabulary and the sentences that they used in the medical setting, so that they can use very professional English to communicate with the patient.
Very good.
I was going to, in relation to mentoring, tell the story about my wife. So my wife's was a professor at Monash University, where we are now, and I was recently talking with a client who's a member of parliament, so a very important person.
XPM?
XPM. Oh, no, not an XPM. Not an XPM. We talked about Mr. Abbott, but that was a bit different. And this politician came back to me the next day and said, "It's funny, my son said that he knew your wife at university, and she had a discussion with him about how he should direct his future, and that changed his life." And for Elizabeth, my wife, that was interesting because she remembered the student but couldn't remember the conversation. So as a mentor, if people are looking up to you, you can have a tremendous influence on people, far greater than you're aware at the time.
Absolutely. Now looking at your own success, can you share with us a particular situation or time where you felt your communication method was effective, and how did you know?
So I want to share my story of I joined kind of pitching competition, which is held by the Victoria government and also the Suzhou government. So they established a kind of the pitching competition for startup company in Australia. So I'm on the stage, on the final pitching stage. So I want to convey my information about my startup, what's the idea and how it can be effectively run in Australia. So I'm thinking that, because I'm doing a kind of startup which is focusing on the cancer prediction model, so I would like to have more Chinese people who have certain high risk of cancer, so I can identify this group of people and give them early alert. So I convey this information to my audience on the pitching competition, and the audience take my message, and I got the first prize of that competition. So I think, thank you so much. So I think that is really important to convey your information and be understood by the audience who haven't have this particular background like medical or treatment, but you have to make them understood and make your information be understood and very simple.
So it was a pitch, wasn't it?
So the pitch is held by the government, Victoria government and Suzhou government. So it's a big event. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And I think for me, it's not a particular time that was successful, but if I can perhaps explain that in my communications with people and in my negotiating style, I use humour a lot. So I'll start a meeting, often telling stories about myself, about my family.
Hilarious.
Well, I often explain that my wife's a lawyer and both of my daughters are lawyers. So with 3 female lawyers, I've lost every debate I've had all through my life. And I think if you put a bit of yourself out there, that's good. So I use humour, and as a negotiator, I tend to start at the end point. So I'm not somebody that starts at one end and then has to get dragged to the centre. I start at the centre and then I don't move. And I think people respect that methodology. They respect the humour. They respect you telling stories about yourself. And they respect the fact that you're fair in your negotiation. So if I see a point that's there's some drafting that's wrong, that's in favour of the other side or should be changed to help the other side, I'll tell people about it. I'll concede points that aren't important. Now the result of that is that after 30-something years of practice, I've got friends in the legal profession all through Australia and now in China who I've got a good relationship with. And if I need some assistance, I can ring them up and they'll nearly always help me because that's the sort of relationship I've got with people. So I think that's using a particular style of communication, and you've got to use the style that suits you. But for me, that works really well. I'm a consensus type person. I'm not keen on conflict, so I use that consensus style in my negotiation.
I do think humour comes from the heart, as you said, Michael, because it's not something you can go and copy somebody. If you try to copy somebody, you could fall over.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, and drawing on your own backgrounds in the areas that you have worked in, is there a golden rule that you can share with our listeners who may be entering the workforce or trying to break into their field of interest?
So the word I want to share with my audience who are entering into the medical background or medical setting, so to be humble. So you have to learn a lot of things. You are always a learner. So as graduate from medical school, you are a new hands in this very complicated situation. You have to learn from your senior doctors, from the consultant, about how to dealing with difficult thing. And also you have to learn with the nurses because they are very familiar with all the guidelines, all the how to treat the patient, how to communicate with them. So you learn from everyone surrounding you, and also you learn from your patient. Patient is the first learner from the any doctors who want to be a better doctor. So I think you have to be humble in your situation, in your medical situation. Have to learn with everyone surrounding you.
Is it
Well
fair to
said.
yeah, I was gonna, this where culture comes into it. Michael, I'd be interested in your view when we talk about be humble, but also you're a lawyer, so I want to see some power from a lawyer that I'm paying lots of money to. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Well, there and you do have to pick your lawyers and your consultants and things. So, for example, I'm not going to be aggressive. I can be if I have to be. I can turn that on and off, but I'm not. I don't think I'm very good at it because it's not my natural style. But some clients, if for example you're going to court, and I try and keep my clients out of court, but if you are going to court, sometimes you've got a client who wants a show. And if that's the case, you've got to get a barrister who's going to get up and rant and rave and put on a good show. In fact, that's not the best barrister. I mean, the best barrister is somebody who knows the law, knows the facts, has done the hard work, and can argue persuasively, because that's actually what a judge or a magistrate wants to hear. They're not really interested in oral skills. They're interested in the facts and the law. So, but yes, sometimes you do have to put on the performance that the client wants.
Why is that? Why would someone want the show? Because of what they're paying, or?
No, I think it's a bit like when I have a discussion with a client, I usually try and explain to them, in a dispute, it's because the other side actually has a different view to you, and you can't say they're wrong. They've just got a different view. So you have to try and work out, what is their view and why are they taking that particular point of view. Some clients then say, well, if you're not prepared to believe me, I don't want you. I only want a lawyer that believes you. And that's a very understandable comment, but I'd say, well, that's okay, but really you want a lawyer who actually understands both sides of the argument and can put your argument as well as possible.
That makes a lot of sense, really does.
It does. And we might have spoken before about mentoring, but here we got this question: what are your views on mentoring? And can you tell us about a time when you have mentored someone or have been mentored?
So I think in my career pathway, I met a lot of mentors and also mentor other people. So I think that from my medical school, I have two mentors. One is my professor for endocrinology, it's because I'm interested in that area. Another one is from the laboratory medicine, because I have to learn how to do experiments. So they teach me a lot of things, including the diagnosis, treatment, and also how to do experiment in the lab. So this is from the mental experience. They give me a lot of education and give me a lot of experience. And also currently when I do our startup company, so there's some interns in my company who want to learn and also nurture it. So I would like to support them, give them more opportunity to do some practical things. Currently, we are establishing a kind of the website and also the app which can be used for Chinese patient, and using that app for the people who want to have a better health care. So I would like to give our intern more opportunity to do what they want, because sometimes we don't have a very clear a picture about this website should be like this or like that, but we would like to have our intern to be using their imagination and using their skills to do what they want.
Tony, looking at mentoring, where have you seen it worked where patients have mentored each other?
Yes, I think that this patient community. So when one patient have a disease, they diagnose with certain disease. Another patient, they also have a certain kind of symptoms. They consult with another patient. So say, okay, when I have this symptom, does that mean this? How do you treat it by the doctors in this hospital? So they can consult with each other and they can learn from each other. It's like the peer mentoring in patient.
Sure. That's encouraged in China, is it? And growing, I guess?
I think so, yeah.
Because I know it's very big here.
I think mentoring culturally is far more important in China than it is in Australia. So I note on WeChat people that I don't really know who aren't in the law say, "Will you be my mentor?" And I think, no way, I don't even know you. So clearly there's a search for mentors in China, and I know that my very good friend and Chinese lawyer Jenny often talks about the people who have been her mentors, and she says that I've been one of her mentors, which I take as very flattering, because I think she's actually taught me far more than I could ever have taught her. So perhaps that's sort of important that mentoring is a two-way street. In Australia, yes, I have had a mentor, but I would never have used that as the label in the past. So that's something I'm sort of coming around to using. And yes, we now set up mentoring systems, etc., at work between younger lawyers and slightly older lawyers. And I think that's really valuable. It's a great way of doing it. We also have secret buddies. So every now and then you're given somebody's name.
Hello. Secret buddy, talk more.
And your job is to make that buddy's life a bit more pleasurable on that day. Perhaps deliver flowers. Somebody gave me Tim Tams that the packet changes colour when you put it in the fridge. I thought that was a fantastic thing for a secret buddy to do.
Okay.
Tim Tams that change colour.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
In studio tonight with us, we have Dr. Tony Lin Zhang, who is the co-founder of Moi Health Tech, which is a peer mentoring program for doctors and nurses in China, wishing to develop their practice from a more international perspectives. Welcome.
Thank you, Xinxin.
And we have also...
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
our second guest, Michael Lanyon, who is a partner at Smith Lanyon Lawyers based in Melbourne. Michael identified the need to set up an office in China in response to people's interest in investing into the Australian market. Welcome.
Thanks, Xinxin. Now, Xinxin, when you invited me, you said that if I wanted to, I could sing a song. But I thought, actually, I'm not a very good singer, so I thought I might read a poem, if that's all right.
That's awesome.
That'd be lovely.
Okay. So this is a poem by an American, Shel Silverstein, and it's called Asians. If we meet and say hi, that's a salutation. If you ask me how I feel, that's a consideration. If we stop and talk a while, that's a conversation. If we understand each other, that's a communication. If we argue, scream and fight, that's an altercation. If later we apologise, that's a reconciliation. If we help each other home, that's a cooperation. And all of these actions added up make civilisation.
I love that.
That's great.
And I say
Very
this
nice.
is a wonderful poem. Is that an exaggeration? You know, I've got to tell you, that's a heck of a lot better than me singing. So I hope you enjoyed that poem.
Very much so.
Very much so.
And once again, who's the author of that poem?
It's an American, Shel Silverstein, who's a children's author and illustrator, a Yank, probably most famous for writing a book called The Giving Tree.
I've heard of that, yeah. Very good. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I would like to share another book that I read the other day. It's a children's book. It's very short. It's the name is Dots.
Dots.
Have you heard about it?
No, but you showed it to me and it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I think I saw that on your WeChat feed, didn't I?
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing. It's also about helping each other. So we got different dots on different page, but with right, you got
He's holding up his tie.
I've got a dotty tie.
absolutely, yeah. So with the help and the communication, and the dot become on the same page with different color.
And how often do we hear those words? Are you on the same page? I'm not on the same page.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm sure if people go and Google that, they're going to find that book. I just remember you
Dots.
showing it to me, and I thought, wow, that's
They're
such
so powerful.
Simple, powerful, visual, with strong meanings. So
Absolutely.
we've got Communicate, we've got the book review, we've got poetry. It's all happening here.
Yeah, now let's move on to our sixth question. In the situation when you have to communicate information that you know people don't want to hear or accept, what strategies have worked for you?
Looking at you, Doctor.
Okay, this is really difficult question. So when you face encounter some situation that people don't want to hear and accept your ideas or suggestions, I think I will be flexible. I will leave that just stay there, and then I will try another way, maybe or a way that can make people feel that it can be acceptable. So I'll ask that what's the baseline? What is the acceptable the thing that they can accept it? So for me, I will be very flexible for this situation. I will talk with them more times, like 2 or 3 times. Otherwise, it cannot be going to a very good consensus. So, but you still have to repeat what you mean, because this is your. If I want to persuade someone to be our consultant, so I will talk with him. If he didn't accept that, but we think that he is a very good candidate, I will continuing talk with him or her in a better way and to make that be happened. So this is a really difficult conversation. I think that it needs some kind of flexible way to dealing with this.
See, when you talk about candidate, you're talking about a win-win situation. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the win-win situation is a really good situation that you can make people feel very comfortable, and yourself will be comfortable.
So when you say the word candidate, this is for your peer mentoring program?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Can I just ask you a doctor-patient question?
Yeah.
When we talk about the hard questions, all right? You told me I'm sick, I'm never going to walk again. I don't have a base where I'm going to accept that. You're a doctor, please fix me.
Yeah, this is really difficult that you have to convey that very unacceptable information. So I think that I have to frankly tell people who are not have the chances to stand out. So this is really difficult, but I still have to say that, because you have to make that final call to make people know the situation he is, but you have to use it other way, not just directly say, yeah, that's the only situation. So I have to use in different way to communicate.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I guess also focusing on some other areas as well, being positive about the ability rather than focusing on something that they might not be able to do. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's about seeing the silver lining, isn't it?
Absolutely, as the point.
That's right. Hooray, I get disabled parking. Whoopee. I'd still like to wear out some shoes, please. That'd be fun.
So I think I'm not good at hard conversations. So I'm sort of really interested to sort of hear that. I have got one tip, which is, because I do a lot of my work on the phone, and I've never done this myself, but people say if you're underprepared and somebody rings you up and you're not really ready, if you just put your finger on the hang-up part of the phone whilst you're in the middle of a sentence, then they won't know you've hung up on them. And then you've got a little bit of time to go and work out the answer before you ring them back. So that might be my bit of practical advice.
Make a
Okay.
note, folk, if that happens with the law firm. Okay. It's not always a technology glitch, is it?
It's about a time, about allowing some time to think.
And I think I said before, I try to use language now that's unequivocal. So instead of saying to somebody that they've got a 10% chance of winning, and I said they hear the word winning, they don't hear the 10%. So I just say, well, you're going to lose. And that's far clearer. People understand that. So don't even talk about the odd chance of winning.
If a lawyer says that to me, I want to say, why am I wasting money on you if I'm going to lose? How do you come back to that? All right, I've spent thousands of dollars for your firm.
Well, you're going
telling-
to lose. You're going to go to jail, but you're going to be there for less time because I've done such a good job for you.
Oh, you're a spin
all
doctor.
right.
Hey, we've got doctors, spin lawyers. That's good. No, it's a fair point, isn't it? You know, I hear what you say, Michael. You want me to listen to you, so say the word lose, but then you put some sugar on top.
Well, for me, lose, because I'm not in the criminal area, for me, lose might be, hey, you're going to have to pay stamp duty.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk about cultural things. I mean, it's culturally unacceptable to pay tax in many countries, but here you have to. And you're going to pay tax, but I think I've got a way of reducing the amount you've got to pay.
Okay.
And people will certainly pay money if they think they're going to save some tax.
For sure.
To follow the rules is very important. Here comes our seventh question. In the work you're doing, how important is listening? And do you ever reflect on, are you doing it well?
Okay. For this question, I have two pathway. One is my doctor's pathway, and another is my startup company pathway. So I think both in this situation, listening is really important, really significant, that it can help you to make the right decision. So when you face the patient, you have to listen to their any unfeeling not very well, or when they have any kind of the claim that they don't have a good appetite or anything. So you have to listen to them. Otherwise, you don't give a right diagnosis. And you have to know what do they have any allergy, and do they have any previously have any history, family history. So this information is really important. So listening is.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. While you've got your doctor's hat on, because I love this.
Yeah.
Because you've been a cancer doctor in China. And of course, there are so many alternative different types of medication, aren't there, for cancer. So if you're telling me I'm sick, I'm going to die, and I'm saying to you, I'd like to try something alternative, are you listening to me?
Yeah, of course, I'll listen to you, and also I give my suggestions. So if there's alternative treatment like some kind of the Chinese traditional medicine,
Yes.
or other herb medicine, so I don't say it's because I'm learning the Western style medicine, so I more give information about Western medicine. But if they want to try the herb medicine, definitely I will suggest some. I know some good doctors who know how to help patients who suffering with cancer. So I can suggest to them to see that kind of doctor and give more professional suggestions. So I think this information I can deliver to my patient if I listen to their what they want. They want to go to the another alternative treatment. Definitely, I'll give suggestions.
Fair enough.
And I think changing professions to the law. So for me, in a negotiation, listening's critical because it's a bit like we're talking about books. There's a book, Getting to Yes. You've got to work out what is it the other side. What are their no-go areas? What are the things they've just got to achieve? And once you know what their motivators are, you can usually work around them. So you've got to listen really hard to work out what are the issues that are important to the other side, and then do a bit of lateral thinking to see how you can satisfy those while still getting what your client wants.
You dropped in a book then, Getting to Yes. Tell us more, please.
Well, it's a fair while since I read that, but it is about, as my recollection goes, it's about the process of negotiation, and rather than having people saying no, having people say yes. And we talk about win-win. It's not always possible, but look, it often is. Can I say, though, in mediations and negotiations, our definition of a victory is when both parties are equally unhappy. So that's the definition of a good settlement. And I said to one of my clients the other day after a mediation, I said the definition of a good settlement is that both clients are equally unhappy. This was not a good settlement. The other side's far more unhappy than you are. So I thought that was a real win.
It's about having the balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
mediation,
Yeah.
Ideally, you win, but unhappy is okay, as long as we're both the same.
Yeah.
Both go home and kick the dog. Oops.
So what advice do you give to people that want to be a leader in particular field, however they're not confident to be assertive?
So I think a leader should be a very the people who have a lot of information. So you have to know the vision. You have to have a good vision in your area. So if you are not very confident, you have to read something. You have to talk with other people and learn something from others. So this is kind of way that can have you have a lot of information and vision to be a leader. So because previously when I was junior medical doctors, I often not have a confidence to be certain leaders in my particular field. So I try to learn with the best doctors in the world. So I watch some videos, listen to some audio programs, and try to learn from them the vision in the area. Say you have to learn the best doctors or best people who are in the world, what they're thinking, what the mindset they have, so that you can grasp that mindset in yourself and to be a leader in your own field. So that's my suggestions.
So I've probably got two things that I'd like to stress. And the first is, as a leader, you have to be calm. So if you're going to throw your arms around and scream, you can't really expect others to follow you. So when there are issues of great pressure, I think I'm fairly well known to keep my cool, stay calm, and try and think my way through the process. And I think that is a good sign of a leader. The other thing is you've got to do the hard work. You've just got to have done all the reading. You've got to have the knowledge, and then you can impress people. Not because you've got a pink tie, not because you speak louder, but because you know more. So I think if it's a combination of leading from the front, staying very calm and in control in times of crisis, and just do the hard work.
Have you been criticised as far as, there's Michael, he's calm, he's just relaxed, he's cool, and he's my lawyer? I do, once again, it gets back to people's perception on, I want to see someone a little bit tense so I know that they're sharing my anxiety. So if I go in and you're just sitting back and relaxed, I'm saying, Michael, I'm about to lose my house.
No, I haven't. I think I get the opposite quite often, though. Often people will say to me, I can't believe how you managed to stay calm through all of that. I was seething, I was furious, I wanted to go and hit somebody, and you kept your cool. So I think people respect that, and I think, but again, you tend to pick the consultant who is the style that you want. So perhaps the people who come to me are looking for somebody who's in control and calm.
That's right. It's a gift, isn't it? A bit like humour.
Yeah, emotion control is very important.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
Just to remind everybody about Empower Your English, we've been going for 18 months and we love doing Communicate on Radio Monash Thursday nights at 6 o'clock, and we hope you're enjoying the show so far. Who have we got in the studio, Zing Zing?
Dr. Tony Lin Zhang, who is the co-founder of Moi Health Tech, which is a peer mentoring program for doctors and nurses in China. wishing to develop their practice from a more international perspective. And we also have Michael Lanyon, who is a partner at Lodge Smith Lanyon Lawyers, based in Melbourne. Michael identified the need to set up an office in China in response to people's interest in investing into the Australian market. Welcome.
Michael, I just want to throw an extra question, if you don't mind. We know it's a hot topic when we talk about Chinese investment into Australia. And as a lawyer, you advocate and you support businesses to be involved. What about those loudmouth people that sit in the pub to say, we don't want any more Chinese investment in my country? Do you come across that?
Look, I don't come across it much, but I get asked the question often in China because it is something that is reported in China from time to time. And my answer tends to be to the Chinese, don't think you're so special. It's not just you. We had the British owned and bought most of Australia for the first 100 years. Then we had the Americans. Then we had the Japanese. Now it's the Chinese term. Or it's the Chinese turn. So don't think you're so special. You're just the current person who's trying to buy our country.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you're right. Because we are governed by the media, aren't we?
We are, and
sadly,
and certainly, people in China have interest in Australia, and bad news travels faster than good news.
What's your thoughts on that, Tony? Because where were you born? You're born in China?
Yeah, born in China in Anhui province.
Right.
And I raised in Beijing. So I worked in Beijing for 7 years. So there's some kind of the news about Chinese people buying what kind of the property with very high cost. So I heard about all of this news and say, okay, a lot of house has been bought by Chinese people, and that's true. But one thing that we still see a lot of other, as Michael said, that there's so many other investors doing investment here, including US, Australian people, and UK people. They do all the investment. It's not only Chinese people doing this. So I heard about this news. So I think about the media has give some information about this, and we also can see some, the headline about this. Yeah.
And sorry, John, if I can just say, so last night I was at the Chinese Museum community dinner because I'm on the board of the Chinese Museum, and we're celebrating 200 years since the first documented Chinese immigrant into Australia. So when you see people turn up at an auction in a street in Melbourne now who are Asian in appearance, it might be that they don't even speak Chinese because their ancestors may have come out a couple of hundred years ago. So
Absolutely.
1.2 million people of Chinese descent in Australia now, and 200 years of Chinese experience in Australia, and that's just made Australia the richer for all of that. It's fantastic.
Going back to communication and media, you've both had experience with media in China?
Yeah.
Newspapers? What about you, Michael?
No, thank heavens. I fly under the radar as much as possible.
Tony, do they compare with Australian media as far as you've got your journalist out there who needs that wow factor story? It doesn't have to be factual. It doesn't have to be correct. What's your view on Chinese media?
So the media always have their only the directions. They want to think about this direction or that direction. It's based on their media's own direction. So I think that in China also we have seen a lot of media who have their own direction like this. So they say, okay, what our opinion about this? They can lead people to think about in that way. And also you can see another media. And also if you can read about the US media and the Australian media, UK media, you have a broad view about what is the world thinking about certain kind of the issues. So not only read one media, you have to read different kind of medias and make a final decision by yourself. So that's what am I thinking. So I always read different kind of medias and think about one issues.
Let's hope our youth are getting a bit smarter too.
Thank you so much.
I'm not calling you young. Youth in general, I'm saying.
Well, okay. He wasn't talking about me, that's for sure.
We're up to question
9.
9.
Looking at your own communication style, if we were to turn back the clock 2 years, what have you learned, and what would you do differently?
Turn back the clock 2 years.
All right,
This
Ken.
is when we realise how young Shinshin is. So if you said to me, turn back the clock 20 years, that works a lot better. But anyway, since you've said 2 years, I'll let Tony answer first.
Okay. So think about 2 years ago, I just been here in Australia for 1 year. So I began to accustom to the culture in Australia. So I have to be more like the active in Australia culture and communicate with my peers, co-workers. So at the very beginning, because English is my second language, I have to communicate effectively and efficient. I have to understand people what they are talking about. So in that time, I'm feeling very difficult for me to understand totally. But what I have learned is that I involved into more activities like afternoon drinking or some kind of the parties, because this can help you to learn with how to communicate easily with daily language, not only your professional language in the hospitals. So definitely this can help me a lot to engage into the culture in Australia. So I think this helped me a lot. So currently I think that
Sorry, Tony, just for the language, can I just check that? So you're saying to learn English, go to lots of parties.
sure.
And after drink.
Yeah, you're right. He is right.
That bit too, Shinshin.
We were talking before about mentoring. So is that something that a mentor told you? Go to a pub with an Aussie?
Actually not, because here I don't have a mentor here, but I try to learn with others. I try to make friends with people who are coming here for a long time. Say some friends from China, and they give me some suggestions that you not only stay with your Chinese peers, you have to stay with different cultural background peers and learn from each other. I think this best suggestion I have in Australia.
When I say mentors, I'm just saying people have told you, give this a go.
Oh yeah, that's true.
All right.
Yeah, I have this information. Yeah.
So I think let's not get caught up on an official mentor.
Yeah.
I think we have family in our life, we have friends in our life that play that role. So if you're getting some tips to do this, give it a go.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think if I look at the last couple of years, some of the things that I've learned have been my cultural experiences and learning about the differences of approach in China and Australia. And if I can give an example, and this is often sort of talked about, but it's the Guangxi style. So a Chinese friend of mine rang me up the other day and said, "Can I come and see you?" It was a Sunday, so it was fine. So he came along and we had a cup of tea and we talked about books, we talked about movies, we talked about the weather. And after 2 hours, he asked me for a favour. Not a big favour. Of course, I said yes. And as a Westerner, I'm sitting there thinking, well, if you'd asked me at the start, then we could have relaxed and we could have actually had a drink like Tony would suggest. But he had to go through this process first. And of course, I have to be careful as a Westerner not to be direct and go straight to business. Because if you do, Chinese people will think, well, how can I trust you? You don't do the niceties and the proper things first. So very different approach. And I find I often have to force myself to sit back and not get straight to the point.
Yeah, there's two ways of looking at that too, because you've got the classic, hi, how are you today? I'm not bad. Hi, how are you today? A lot of my Chinese friends to say, have you had a drink? Are you hungry?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
Oh,
Yeah.
what do you want?
What do you want? Yeah. So there is that interesting icebreaker, isn't it? Do you really need to go through to be superficial or get to the point?
Yeah. So for me, I think that is also a kind of culture shock. So in China, we always say a lot of things before we give the point. So we give a lot of surrounding information and then we give the point. But in Australia, you have to give the point at the very beginning because you are clear about your point, what kind of thing you want to do. And I think that is a good way because when I come in here, I always encounter this situation. So currently, I learned how to deliver a good point at the very beginning and so that we'll not confuse people. If I want to do a kind of the business with people, I have to talk with them, say, okay, so today I want to do this thing. So talk with you, and then we can relax.
This reminded me about my grandma. She often talked with me about something which are really not direct, and most often he lost what she wanted to say, so I couldn't get the point. Sometimes it happened, but yeah, this is a different things though.
I remember you and I talking about this just before, a few days ago. Well, your grandmother would sort of go around in circles and wouldn't get to the point, so you'd be wondering what's your message?
After 3 hours, yes.
And as a Westerner, I can't trust somebody that won't
Absolutely.
say what they think.
It's so frustrating, yeah.
Because on the edge of your seat, you're wondering what's coming up next, or...
Yeah, well, it's just not how I'm used to dealing with things.
As he sits there with his arms crossed. Look at that body language going right now. Tell you what, Mr. Calm,
But
cool.
I'm not sitting back, am I?
No, you're leaning forward. It's because we've got you on a bad chair. We always sit lawyers in this chair.
I'm out with my hands open now.
That's right. So we're wrapping up soon. We've had a great conversation. Just to remind everybody, you're listening to Communicate on Empower Your English. And we are going to be back next week on Thursday at 6 p.m. And we'd like to thank our guests. Do you want to remind who our guests are, please, Sixie?
Absolutely. In our studio tonight, we got Dr. Tony Lin Zhang, who is the co-founder of Moi Health Tech, which is a peer mentoring program for doctors and nurses in China wishing to develop their practice from a more international perspective. And we also have Michael Lanyon, who is a partner at Smith Lanyon Lawyers based in Melbourne. Michael identified the need to set up an office in China in response to people's interest in investing into the Australian market. Thank you. Welcome.
And Zixi, can I thank you once again for sitting in for Zen tonight? You're doing a great job as co-host.
My pleasure.
And we thank our guests. Any closing comments, gentlemen?
Yeah.
No?
Well, it's been about communication. Communication is just so important. And as I say, for me, language is very important. And I do have Chinese lawyers in my office who are not, who like Tony says, so English has become wasn't their primary language. And I work very hard on them. I'm pretty tough because as a wordsmith, each word is important. And whilst they can communicate themselves well speaking, actually drafting tight legal documents is very difficult. So that's something they've got to work hard at.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.